Today we are tackling a real classic in the sci-fi world, The Day the Earth Stood Still. But we're not just going to, rehash the plot points.
Right.
We're going deeper. We're looking at what this film says about humanity's relationship with our planet, with each other, and with the unknown.
It's a film that really holds up. I mean, it came out in 1951, but so many of the themes still resonate today.
Absolutely. So to kick things off, let's lay out what we'll be exploring. First, we'll dive into the whole first contact scenario. Klaatu arrives in his shiny flying saucer, lands in Washington, D.C., and what happens?
Humanity freaks out.
Pretty much. Instead of welcome to Earth, it's more like take your alien germs and go home. It's fascinating how the film uses this to examine our fear of the other, this tendency to see anything different as a threat.
It's almost like a commentary on xenophobia, but on a cosmic scale.
Right. And then there's the way the film uses the ecological crisis as a central plot point. It's not just about an alien visit. It's about why they're here in the first place.
Yeah, and that's what makes The Day the Earth Stood Still so unique for its time. It directly connects humanity's survival to how we treat the planet.
And finally, we'll tackle the concept of the end of times, as depicted in the film. Is it a straightforward apocalypse, or is there something more nuanced going on?
It's definitely more than just buildings crumbling and explosions. It's about the collapse of systems. Moral, social, ecological. It's decay from within, driven by our own choices.
Okay, let's start with Klaatu's grand entrance. He lands in Washington, D.C., not exactly a random spot to choose.
Right in the heart of power, Almost like he's making a statement right from the start.
And the government's reaction, well, let's just say they don't exactly roll out the red carpet.
More like tanks and soldiers. It's an immediate escalation, this instinctive need to control the situation, even if it means resorting to force.
They label Klaatu an enemy before he even has a chance to speak. It really makes you question how we'd react in a similar situation. Would fear and distrust completely override any attempt at diplomacy?
Well, the film does offer a contrasting perspective through Helen Benson and her son, Jacob. They're understandably cautious, but there's also this underlying desire to understand, to connect with Klaatu on a human level.
It's like they represent a different side of humanity, one that's not completely consumed by fear.
And the generational difference between Helen and Jacob adds another layer. Helen, the scientist, approaches the situation with a kind of intellectual curiosity, while Jacob, being younger, carries this inherited baggage of distrust, reflecting how anxieties and biases can be passed down through generations.
It makes you think about nature versus nurture, right? How much of our reaction to the other is innate, and how much is learned from those around us.
It's a complex question, and the film doesn't shy away from that complexity.
But let's shift gears for a moment. Putting aside our initial fear response, the film digs into a really critical issue, the ecological crisis that brought Klaatu to Earth in the first place.
Right. This isn't just a random alien visit. It's a targeted intervention. The aliens aren't here to conquer, they're here to assess.
They see Earth as a system in peril, and the culprit, us. Our disregard for the environment has pushed the planet to the brink. It's a chilling indictment of human behavior.
It really is, and it directly parallels the warnings we hear from scientists today about climate change, mass extinction, the very real possibility that we're causing irreversible damage to our planet.
So it's more than just a sci-fi thriller, right? The Day the Earth Stood Still is a cautionary tale wrapped in a silver spacesuit. But is there any hope? Are we destined for destruction, or is there a chance for redemption? We'll delve into that question next time as we continue our deep dive into this thought-provoking film.
It's interesting how the film doesn't explicitly state what changes Klaatu's mind, like what gives him that little bit of hope for humanity. It's subtle, which I think adds to the overall impact.
Yeah, it makes you really think about what it would take for advanced alien civilization to look at us and say, okay, maybe they're not so bad after all. But speaking of bad, let's talk about the whole end of time scenario in the film. We've already established it's not your typical alien invasion, no death rays or planet-busting lasers.
Right, it's much more insidious, much more internal, like a slow, creeping decay.
So how is the end of the world depicted? What's the mechanism, so to speak?
Well, it's not so much a single event as it is a total breakdown. Think of it as a machine with all its parts slowly grinding to a halt. We see those nanorobots, these tiny machines, dismantling everything in their path.
Almost surgical, isn't it? Very precise, very methodical.
Exactly. And it's not just physical objects being destroyed, it's the systems we rely on, our infrastructure, our technology, even our moral and social structures. Everything just crumbles.
It's like the film is saying that the real apocalypse isn't some external force, it's the collapse of everything that holds us together.
Yes, it's very much a decay from within, a consequence of our own actions or inactions.
So it's not just a physical end, but a societal and even spiritual one as well. It's bleak, man, but also incredibly thought-provoking.
And that's the brilliance of it. It forces us to confront these uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the path we're on.
Okay, so humanity is on the fast track to oblivion, and then Klaatu steps in like some kind of cosmic referee and says, hold up, I'm calling a timeout. It's like he sees a glimmer of hope, a reason to give us another shot.
Right, and it's not some grand gesture or display of power. It's a quiet, almost understated moment of mercy.
But this reprieve comes at a cost, doesn't it? I mean, all of our technology is wiped out, gone in an instant.
It's like hitting the reset button on civilization. Humanity is suddenly thrust back into a pre-industrial age, forced to start over without the tools that led to our downfall.
Wow. It's a radical solution, but it raises so many questions. Can we learn from our mistakes and rebuild without repeating the same destructive patterns? Or are we doomed to repeat the cycle, even with a clean slate?
It's like the film is asking, what does it truly mean to be human? Are we defined by our technology, or is there something more fundamental, something that can survive even the most catastrophic events? The ending leaves us with a lot to ponder.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, what would it take for us to change? What kind of wake-up call would be enough to shake us out of our complacency and set us on a more sustainable path?
Okay, so we've really dug into some of the big ideas and the day the Earth stood still. But, this movie didn't just appear out of nowhere. It had a context. It both reflected and influenced the world around it.
Or absolutely. I mean, this was 1951. The Cold War was heating up the atomic bomb, was this fresh, terrifying reality. And there's this underlying anxiety about what humanity was capable of.
Right. So the film taps into these very real fears, but it also frames them in this sci-fi context, which somehow makes them both more entertaining and more thought-provoking. Yeah, exactly. It's like it allows us to explore those really complex issues at a safe distance. It's not about us directly, it's about these fictional characters, but the parallels are undeniable.
And one of the most striking parallels is this whole ecological angle. I mean, back then, the environmental movement was just starting to gain traction, but the day the Earth stood still really put the issue front and center.
It was ahead of its time in that regard. The film explicitly links humanity's survival to the health of our planet. It's not just an abstract concept, it's a matter of life and death.
And that message feels even more urgent today, doesn't it? I mean, we're seeing the impacts of climate change firsthand. Now it's not some distant threat anymore.
Absolutely. So the question is, have we learned anything from this film? Have we actually changed our behavior in any meaningful way?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? On one hand, there's more awareness about environmental issues than ever before. But on the other hand, we're still consuming resources at an unsustainable rate, pumping greenhouse gases into the atmosphere like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag, for sure. We've made some progress, but we've got a long way to go. And I think that's what makes the day the Earth stood still so unsettlingly relevant. It's like this mirror reflecting back our own failures and our potential for self-destruction.
Okay, so let's play a little thought experiment. If Klaatu were to visit Earth today, in 2025, would he reach the same conclusion? Would he see humanity as a threat that needs to be neutralized?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I mean, on the surface, things might look even worse than they did back in 1951. The environmental crisis is more severe, political tensions are high, technology has advanced to a point where it could be used for both good and incredibly destructive purposes.
So are we doomed? Is there no hope for redemption?
Well, I don't think the film gives us a definitive answer, and that's part of its power. It leaves us with this lingering question, this challenge to look at ourselves honestly and critically and ask, what kind of future do we want to create? Do we have the will to change, to break free from these destructive patterns?
It's a heavy responsibility, but it's also empowering in a way. It means we have a choice. We're not just passive passengers on this spaceship Earth. We're the pilots. And the decisions we make, both individually and collectively, will determine our course.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the key takeaways from The Day the Earth Stood Still. It's a call to action. It's a reminder that we have the power to change the trajectory of human history, but we have to be intentional about it. We have to choose hope over despair, cooperation over conflict, and sustainability over short-term gain.
Powerful stuff. So as we wrap up this deep dive into The Day the Earth Stood Still, Let's remember that this film is more than just a piece of entertainment. It's a reflection of our hopes and fears, our triumphs and failures. And ultimately, it's a reminder that our future is not predetermined. It's up to us to write the next chapter.
Well said. And until next time, keep exploring those big questions, keep challenging your assumptions, and never stop looking up at the stars. Who knows, maybe there's a Klaatu out there somewhere, watching us, waiting to see what we'll do next.